There was once a wealthy man, a householder, who lived at the time of the Buddha. His name was Anathapindika, a very incredibly wealthy businessman who, while visiting his brother-in-law, the husband of his sister, and their family, which was customary, and he liked to do that, especially after he would conduct business and things. And I think it was in Rajagha, the royal city. At that time, Lord Buddha was also there, in that city. Now, Anathapindika was used to, once he took care of his business, because he was so wealthy that he would give money on loan, basically. So in a sense, he was a businessman plus a banker. And there weren't any like banks per se, like structures, buildings. People were the bankers, the wealthy ones. And so he had finished his business with the king, and he had gone to his sister's or his brother-in-law's house. And he was surprised because every time he would go there, he would be the center of attention. Because he was the kid's favorite uncle, he was the favorite brother to his sister, and the favorite brother-in-law to his brother-in-law. But now he saw that everyone's attention was on something else, which he couldn't figure out at first. See, everyone was busy preparing a meal. They had started like in the afternoon of the day prior to the actual lunch dana, which was going to be offered, apparently. He had no clue why. So he starts asking questions. Is the king getting, does the king have a son or daughter who's getting married that you're all busy? Because they knew the royal family, so. And they say, no, could you just step aside and let us do this, So he felt like he was being almost in the way of them conducting their thing. So he asks a bunch of questions. Is any of my nephews or nieces getting married that you didn't tell me about? What is this all about? Like everything is outside, there's a huge mansion, so who's coming? Somebody's coming. Somebody's obviously invited. Because all the servants and employees, everyone is doing things other than what they're supposed to. Everybody's cooking, preparing a meal, preparing the tables, preparing the canopy, to make sure there's enough shade, etc., etc. Preparing the flowers, getting stuff brought in. So you can imagine the commotion, and he's not getting any attention. No one's paying any attention to him. But he's noticing that no one, especially his sister and his brother-in-law and the kids, are not upset. They're joyful while they're preparing for this big thing that he doesn't know what it is yet. So the brother-in-law says, we are preparing for a lunch dana for the Buddha. That's all he hears. The Buddha, the word. And he turns to his brother-in-law and says, what did you say? And he says, we are preparing a meal because I invited the Buddha and his congregation of monks to come for tomorrow's meal. And he says, did you say the Buddha? And he says, yes. And he wants to confirm again, he asks, did you say the Buddha? He says, yes, the Buddha. And he says, where? Where? Show me. Where is he? And he points in the direction and says, he's in that area outside the city gates. Now the problem was that it was already late in the day. And he thought to himself, well, wait a minute, if I can't just go now, because he was now, every cell in his body wanted to jump out of that mansion and just go and see the Buddha, whom he had never met, in this life at least. So and they say, no, you can't go now because it's inappropriate. Plus, the city gates are going to close because it's a palace. The old cities were all constructed with huge walls to protect. It's a royal city, after all. So after a certain time, it closes, and they don't open the gates for anybody. They don't delay. So he's now kept awake all night. He can't go to sleep. He can't go to sleep because something in him is boiling, something in him is dragging him, something in him is pulling him. So he says, I can't wait. So he gets up and he starts walking. He risks it all. He jumps, I think, and he has to walk through the cemetery. Imagine, the richest person probably in India, male, businessman in India at the time, who's always been taken care of, catered to, fed with a silver or golden spoon, now walking through smudge or slimy stuff and things, and the cemetery smells, all that. He doesn't care. He's walking towards where he believes is where the Buddha is found, where he's residing. Part of him is thinking, well, this is not an appropriate time because I'm going to be waking up the teacher if I go. Says, so he now starts to hesitate halfway through, and there's a fog. He's really close, but there's a fog. It is at that moment he hears the words. Someone calling him with his other name that not many people knew about, especially anyone outside the family never knew about. Yet this voice was calling him, come, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid, come. You see, Lord Buddha had known of the heart's inclination of Anathapindika, and he was waiting for him. And he comes, he approaches Lord Buddha, he falls to his knees in respect, adoration, reverence. His heart is in full bloom. He's so safe, so secure, being in the presence of the Buddha, that just a few words from Lord Buddha in teaching him the Dhamma, that he becomes a Sotapanna, the first stage awakened one, experiencing Nibbana. Lord Buddha also talks to him about the value of generosity. Not that he needed to, but it helps to break a person from their attachment to things that we believe belong to us, to things that we have accumulated and kept for a rainy day. These are terms, rainy day, for when the going gets tough, things like that. But when they do get tough, when there is a flood, there's flash flooding going on in Europe, there's flash flooding going on in America, in Asia, monsoon, typhoons, this, that. Somehow we think that the rich people are not subject to those. No, once it hits, it hits. And many rich people die without having given themselves the opportunity to experience joy, the joy of giving. And that is the thing which really shocked Anathapindika the day prior. Because he saw how much work, and obviously everything calculates and equates with money. You don't become that wealthy without having some appreciation for wealth. But he was looking and seeing how much it's costing this, how much food is being brought in, this and that. But he was impressed by what it was doing. The act itself was doing to the people who were preparing. They were so joyful. And that was very impactful. Today, when people think about doing a generous act, we're always thinking about the reward we get afterwards, usually from others. Completely avoiding, or completely ignoring rather, the joy that is to be had from us doing it. In the Anguttara Nikaya, you have several suttas where Lord Buddha talks about the 3 phases of generosity, the action of generosity. Not just money, by the way, anything. It might be you're sitting on a chair or on a bus or on a train, and somebody comes in and you notice they're all wet, or they've been running to just get to the train or the bus, and you've been sitting there for a while or just got there yourself, and then you think to yourself, well, it might be good because this person does not expect anyone to give them their seat, to give him their seat. What if I were that one to surprise him, to give him a gift? It might be something like that. Or food that you get. Or you get, the leftovers, and we call it doggy bag in the US. And you have plenty of food with you, and you're taking the box with you, and then you see somebody over there in the corner barely able to survive. You look at them. They're sitting there with their cup saying, hey, could you afford something? And you have a bag full of food, warm perhaps still. When you hand that over to them, it's quite a remarkable thing that happens. So it's not necessarily just money that we're talking about, but any act of giving. So Lord Buddha talks about 3 phases of giving. 1 involves the person who's about to give, who's having the intention of giving. And in their mind, just the thought, the intentional thought that I'd like to give this, and it generates a certain joy in their heart without them having even given anything yet or prepared the food. And this is what was happening to Anathapindika's family, who was getting ready for giving the gift. See, before the gift was even given, you already are extracting such incredible amounts of joy from the possibility of it. It's amazing that Lord Buddha saw this, the value of this, and how transforming it is. Not can be, but it is, in fact. And when you see that it hasn't even happened yet. So the person isn't thinking of the reward in time, temporally to take place. This is what I notice happening in the world a lot of time when people do make an offering. A lot of times this is what people have been programmed into thinking. Especially to Buddhist monks, if you make an offering to a Buddhist monk or a temple, then you are, depending on who the monk is, you are securing yourself incredible amounts of rewards in a next life, in a heavenly realm, or in a human life, but with such incredible amounts of resources and things. Gifts, basically the return. But what happens from now until then? No one mentions anything. But Lord Buddha does. So the first requirement, he says, for a generous act, to be called a generous act, is you must experience joy and happiness before giving. That's one. Requirement number one. Two, during the giving process. That's why it's important that when a person is offering food or a meal, they offer it with both hands. They themselves, the food or the thing that they have prepared, they must touch it. They must hold it with both hands and offer it if there is the possibility for this. If there are no possibilities, of course, the person is sick, the person is far away, unable to personally hand over that, that's different. But during the giving process, the person experiences incredible amounts of joy that cannot be bought. Many people own billions of dollars of properties, possessions. You look at them, they're sad, they're unhappy. Millionaires I would come across and they're depressed. They're always running, always anxious to make sure that their money is safe, to make sure that they're making enough money to hit those goals, financial goals, etc., etc. But you look and look, you really are at a loss because it's so hard to find joy. So during the giving process. And then the third requirement is after the giving has taken place. In hindsight, when you look at it, when you remember it, it gives you the same level of joy as it did before, during, and now after. This is truly the gift that keeps on giving. Now, whatever happens after this, the actual rewards that are to be gained, that is left for when it happens. Any responsible person, any aware person, anybody who's grounded, anybody who's lived in this world and knows what's what, especially money-savvy individuals, they can agree that, it's none of my business about the future, whether it does happen or not. I need some tangible results. I need to see something that is real. And there was a general in Vesali, his name was General Siha. One time he approaches Lord Buddha, on a different incident, by the way, different time in Buddha's life, and he comes and he says, I hear a lot from different teachers about the big thing about generosity, this and that, and everyone seems to promise me a heavenly life, everyone seems to promise me heavenly delights, heavenly mansions, this, after I'm dead or in future lives. He says, I'm not into any of those things because he's a general, He orders thousands of soldiers to go to their death, in a sense. All right? He leads them in battle. So he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. So he knows what he's talking about. He's firmly grounded. And Lord Buddha says, I totally concur with what you're saying. But he lists several benefits to giving that the general could not deny. He says, when you are being generous, people respect you. When you are not attached to your belongings, to your money, this and that, whatever you possess, people are not going to be afraid of you, that you are a very miserly person. And whenever you walk into an assembly or a gathering, you walk with your chest held high, with your chin and your forehead lifted. You have nothing to hide. People know that you are no-nonsense kind of a person. And you don't have any necessarily ulterior motives. And you're not after their wealth, because you just gave away a big chunk of your wealth. That makes them be more relaxed. So, and people trust you more. Especially trust you with their money. And he says, yeah, everything you said I actually agree with. Because these are things that are observable. Why? Because he has experienced them. He says, I have experienced every single one of these things that you mentioned. Every time I walk into an assembly, people respect me. Not because I'm a general, but because I am truly a generous person. I give. Not necessarily just with money, by the way. I'm just recalling now in the capacity of a academic administrator when I was a department chair at a K through 12 school, and I was the math and science department chair. I used to teach the different subjects on science. And sometimes I would get students who would come and they're doing their college transfer and things like that. They're getting ready to apply to universities or colleges, and then they would like me to write a referral or a recommendation letter rather. And I would see how difficult it is for some people to say yes for some reason. And these are good kids. I've had them for years. So I know them, how they've transformed themselves. And if they were lazy, now they're not. Or now they're very ambitious and they're working and have been working for at least a few months. And then I would look at my position. Sometimes people would bend over backwards and say, no, I can't. Come up with excuses. When you know that the happiness of this child, of this teenager, who's ready to embark in their life, for some reason, is depending on what you say and the letter that you're going to be writing for them. Every single time that I've written for them a recommendation letter, and they get it, you should see, some of them cried. Especially when they do get into colleges and they come back and they want to give you a hug. They're so happy. Some of them cry. And that's also generosity, because you use your position. So I am assuming here, because I haven't seen any records in the suttas of this. I would be surprised to find one, by the way, but imagine somebody wants to come and wants to get an early retirement from the military, or somebody whose mom is sick or family is sick and the general is about to go to war and you are one of his soldiers, and you say, sir, general, whatever, I need to be with my parents, they're dying. So an act of generosity would entail him at that moment weighing all the factors and saying, you know, war, battles, this is always going to go on, but how many moms does this person have? How many dads does this person have? One. Sure, go ahead, I'll sign a waiver, go. That did not involve any money. That involved him pulling himself away from this identification, from this sense of, well, I have this position and I will staunchly defend it, just like you would defend your wealth and money and all that. People are more protective of their bank account, of their savings, of their IRAs than they are of their spiritual practice. Do you know that? It's the easiest thing because it's not tangible, really, unless the person has actually imbibed and made it part of one's life, one's very fabric of being, the practice, the spiritual practice. Otherwise, it's just something that is ephemeral, something that is all foggy, something that is hazy and floating about. Nothing tangible about it. But the money, the dollar that they have, or the whatever gold coin or something they possess, that's mine. Anathapindika didn't see any of that in his brother-in-law, but he saw that state before the event took place of the lunch dana, and then the following day he saw when they were offering the food to the Buddha and his bhikkhus, how even more joyful they were. And then for ages they always talked about that day. I'm presuming it was only once, but chances are there were many, many such days that they offered lunch meal. Now, Anathapindika was so impressed by this, and especially the fact that he found his teacher. He didn't want to let go. He wanted to make sure that he would get the Buddha, his teacher, to come and stay close by to where he lived, not Rajagha, but he lived in Savatthi, which is not very, very far, but still far enough from Rajagha. These places do exist, by the way, these cities. They're old. In modern day, they call it in India Shravasti. The other one is called Rajagraha, the dwelling place of kings, Raja actually. So, because Lord Buddha didn't have a place to stay in Jeta's park, so which in Savatthi, he sends his scouts out, Anathapindika, to look for a place that would become, the land first. He has to secure the land, and then he has to build on it. After scouring the whole terrain, looking, and they locate one specific area. But that belongs to a prince, a certain prince. His name was Jeta. Now, because he's connected with all royalty throughout the land, he knows everyone. So he goes and, sits down with Jeta, Prince Jeta, and they say, oh, they're so respectful towards him, of course. And he says, I am eyeing this land. Let's walk to your land, to your park, one park. He says, it's perfect. The sunrise hits it in nice, angle. It's somewhat hilly. It's not inside Shravasti or Savatthi, but it's far enough, and I want to purchase it. He says, oh, no, it's not for sale. This is my, my place. I go to rest and, He says, please, name your price. Prince Jeta says, you're not getting what I'm saying. This is not for sale. And he says, no, come on. It's not for me. I'm getting this for someone. He says, whoever you're getting it for, it's not for sale. Even if you go ahead and completely blanket the whole thing with gold, I still would have a hard time selling it. He says, okay, that's it. You just set the price. He says, what do you mean? He says, you just set the price. You just told me that if I blanket the place with gold. Yeah, but I was kidding, he says. I'm not kidding, he says. I'm going to buy this land from you while I blanket it with gold coins. He says, no way. He says, yes. And he gives the order, and his men, Anathapindika, his men go and start bringing in cartwheels of gold, over 50 of them, to the point where he empties out his entire treasure house of monies. Now, cartwheel after cartwheel, money is being brought in. Not just money, not just gold, other stuff too. And you can imagine the workers having to lay down the gold coins all around. And I've been to Savatthi, I've been to Jeta's Park. It's pretty big. Even if you take 1 acre, the gold that you have to lay down to spread it out, and it's like to make sure that no spot, this is what the commentators would say, when the sun hit it, you couldn't see the land, because all you saw was the reflection of the gold coins back at you. That's how packed it was. It didn't leave a single, except for one little part, because now his treasure houses were emptied out completely. And this is when Anathapindika becomes kind of experiences heartache a little bit, anxiety. A person, a stingy, miserly person would say, he must have realized how stupid he was. He gave away all his wealth, his kids' wealth, this, that, inheritance. No, his sadness was due to the fact that he did not have enough to complete that part, because it was left without any gold covering it. Now you can imagine Prince Jeta standing there with his jaw dropped and floored, basically. He's seeing this. This is not possible. This is just not possible that anybody in his status could do this. And to the point where he says, enough. Anathapindika, enough. I get it, he says. The land is yours, he says. And just to set you at ease, he says, don't worry about this last patch that you didn't cover. I'm going to cover that, he says. And the way to do that, he says, because now he learned as to what was the purpose of the purchase. He says, this is for my teacher, the Buddha, and his Sangha of Bhikkhus, and Prince Jeta is just completely distraught with this. Like, who does this? What love he has in his heart. This is generosity. Because he was already experiencing now the joy that his family experienced in Rajagha the day prior to them offering the lunch dana. So now he was experiencing an incredible amount of joy, because he knew what this would mean. The Buddha would have a place to live. His monks would have a place to live. Not only that, but people would become arahants on that land that he purchased. The Dhamma would be taught on that land that he purchased. In fact, he didn't know this, but for over 25 vassas, Lord Buddha spent there. And countless were the beings who did become awakened there. Not just people. So many of the suttas were actually taking place at that location, which ended up being Anathapindika's monastery in Jeta's Park. You have countless suttas throughout, the 84,000 suttas that start and finish in that location. And by the way, Prince Jeta says, don't worry about that patch, as I was saying, but he says, I will complete that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to establish the building part and build this incredible, beautiful entrance to the monastery. Hand-carved wooden doors, gates to the monastery. And they go ahead and build the monastery with all the kutis. And one kuti that later on is called the flower chamber, which was Lord Buddha's room. And you can go there today, the remnants of it. It's a very small, humble. It's not a room as such, because out of respect, archaeologists have just laid out the parameters, the bricks and all that. But you can feel the energy, definitely. For years, Anathapindika, every time he would go there. By the way, Lord Buddha stayed there, so Anathapindika's wish was fulfilled because his teacher was close by him at least for another 25 years. even though Anathapindika didn't live that long, because he died a few years later. But what did happen was his whole entire family became noble disciples, because they would constantly go and he would take them to hear the Buddha. He would invite Lord Buddha and the Sangha to come to his house as well for lunch. His son, who was somewhat belligerent and uninterested in anything to do with the spiritual life or religious life, Anathapindika says, every day you go to hear the Buddha talk, my teacher, I'm going to give you a gold coin. Every day. And his son was like intrigued. He's like, really? Seriously? He says, yes. But you have to tell me what he taught. What was the talk about, instead of just daydreaming? He says, sure. So as he starts going back and forth every day, because every day counts for one big piece of gold. Who wouldn't want that? Every teenager wants that. Especially in those days, because you could buy a house with one gold coin in the territory. To the point where he starts to really get it, the teaching. And then he goes to his father one day and says, Dad, it's okay. You don't have to pay me. I'm good. I want to go. And he too becomes a Sotapanna, his son. We often forget the joys of giving for the right reasons. This is why I insist on reminding people that it is not simply a matter of tradition to give. Although it can be helpful to start something in a person, to think outside the boundary of what's in it for me mentality. But when a person is depriving oneself from the joy to be had from even the thought of doing something, let's say there's a neighbor you have and they have a lawn or a front yard that's dirty, or a wall that needs painting, or there's trash to be collected, and it's not on your property. The night before you say, you know what, I'm going to do something good for her. Without them knowing, they're at work even, you go and clean it up. And you don't put it on YouTube, because that's the thing which I've been noticing a lot. Almost like a good Samaritan act, but you're actually after some type of a gain. It's like leaving your business card there. That was your price. You actually got paid for that. That's not generosity. When a person does something good and then wants a plaque for it, where does the generous part come in? One time I was at a church, because I come from a Christian background, and years ago, and I was, as a family obligation, I went. I was a Buddhist back then too, but my family isn't. My sisters and family members, brothers, relations. So I went there and I was looking and just admiring the paintings, this and that, and the chorus and things, the hymns playing, singing. And then I noticed all these plaques, golden plaques, even behind every one of the benches. One long, church benches. You might have anywhere from 10 to 25 or 30 or 50 plaques with names of people. And my sister was next to me, I think, and I asked, what is this? And she said, this is to, the church would accept donations so that you can actually put your name there. And I said, why do I need to know the person's name? In memory of, and then she says, I also put my family's name on a plaque because in memory of our parents. And I said, why did you do that? Really? Has nothing to do with the persons who are dead. in memory of, in respect of. It has a lot to do with showing off, basically. Putting your mark on something. In a way, it's not so different than a graffiti on a wall. Who needs that? Definitely the dead don't need that. But people want to have some type of a reward coming back because they still can't touch the heavenly realms, this and that. So they want to see now something that they can show, they can nudge other people and say, hey, look at that. You see that? That's mine. That's my name. I built that in Asia when I was there a few years ago. The second or third time I was there, a woman came by and said, do you see this building? Do you see this building? And I said, yeah, I'm staying in it. Yeah. He says, do you know who built it? And I said, I don't know, but I think you do. I was like, and she said, oh, it cost, I don't know how many million ringgits to build it. And guess who covered it? My husband and I. We paid it off. And I said, wow, good on you, and we appreciate it that you built this. Now, this is just one example. This is really, but it's kind of cheapens the beauty of the generosity, because the person, if the person is really, really experiencing the joy of it before giving it, during giving it, and especially after, they really don't need to be like on a loudspeaker announcing it to the world. You hear Bill Gates is donating half of his billions and to charity. Like, why do I need to know that? Why does this have to be announced? If it is true even, which is highly doubtful. Because these people are very much after money. Generosity means you are willing to let go of the burden of money. You are willing to go to release the burden of being so self-absorbed. When you're giving from your time, you're also telling yourself that my life could also be about others. The energy I have, the time I have, when you're going and cleaning up someone else's lawn, that's your valuable time you're giving up. You're including someone else into your sphere. You're making someone feel safe. You're saying to someone else, I care about you. Whether it's by giving your time, by giving what you know, your knowledge, your understanding, your expertise, and not charging them for it. Whether it is your food you're sharing, your money you're sharing, your bed, or your house, somebody comes in and they don't have a place to sleep, and you give them your bed and you go and sleep on the couch or on the floor. Unfortunately, we're living in a time period where these things are not necessarily encouraged or talked about enough, or they're looked at something as not so helpful, because who you are has everything to do with what you own, where you are. How important you are has everything to do with your, in Pali the term is upadhi, your possessions, your assets. So to give up all that and become a practitioner, it's really an anomaly for the world to understand. My family, my brothers and sister, and people who know me, colleagues, co-workers in the past, they're still flabbergasted. They're surprised, and they have to make sense of this illogical, according to them, step in wanting to leave everything, all my achievements, academic, this, that, professional, and walking away from all that and not earn a living, basically. Give up all that. They don't understand that. So they have to justify it. People have to justify it in their mind that, well, it was a wrong decision, but why? So they start looking for errors in the person, just like they would be looking at somebody who's given up a bigger wealth or a bigger group of family or influence, like the case was with the noble disciples of Lord Buddha's. People were calling them names. They were calling Lord Buddha names. Calling him foolish. Because everybody in the world was seeking to get that themselves, and he who has that and gives it up, it's really nonsensical. So the world will try to tarnish that, completely ignoring the fact that there is this other world which gives so much joy by giving. It gives me so much joy when I share what I know, and that's, we know from the suttas from Lord Buddha how the greatest act of generosity is sharing of Dhamma. Dhamma that you have tasted, you know, you are living it. To share that and without holding one hand behind you. There's that saying that, Lord Buddha says, I teach you with open fists, open hands. Both open. Instead of just, I'll keep this for myself just in case. Just in case. I don't want you to turn on me, or I don't want you, what if you one day you leave me and I'll still have some, the upper hand. All these stupid, silly things have nothing to do with generosity. It has to do with joy. And each of us in our own capacity can experience so much joy. And again, the limit is placed by none other than ourselves. It's not the amount of, the bank account you have, the credit line you have, the savings you have, the resources you have. It's not about that or those things. No. It's about how much are you willing to push the envelope. Are you wanting to play safe? That's what people are doing. Anathapindika didn't play safe. He didn't. And that's why his joy was limitless, boundless. So I wish that kind of a boundless joy to everyone, upon everyone. Sukhiyot.